We're going to be talking about FireKnight Hard today and how to beat it. So without further ado, let's just hop straight into it. And I'm going to showcase the team composition here to you that you can use for fighting all stages of the FireKnight Hard. And now for the initial showcase of the team, I'm going to be showing it off on stage 6 because this is where it's most consistent with the gear, the masteries, the champions, and the stats that I have. But this particular team I was able to successfully use all the way up to stage 10. As it's currently built, it is an auto-friendly team for stage 10 as well. However, the win rate does go down a little bit. So instead of the 100% win rate that you're going to have on stage 6, it's 100%. I've done literally thousands of runs at this point because I've had this team functional for a few different fusions, and then obviously like FireKnight and Dungeon Divers events and those sorts of things. When they have like the boosted Savage and regen and stuff, I'm usually in here farming as well. So overall, a few thousand runs, probably like 2,000 plus runs I would say at this point, and it has not failed a single time on stage 6. So we know it's 100% there. On stage 10, though, it goes down to probably about a 90% win rate team, so you are going to fail 1 out of 10 runs, which certainly isn't the best, right? And I'll talk about how to alleviate that a little bit, but as you can see, this is the team here so far. So we have Lady Mikage, we have Neldor, Zenogray, Newt, and then Farrakhan the Fat. Extremely accessible, all things considered. Newt, Farrakhan the Fat, or not Farrakhan the Fat rather, but Newt, Zenogray, and Lady Mikage were all former fusions. Now, I know on the last video I made, some people were like, well, just because they're a fusion doesn't mean they're free-to-play friendly. It's like, it's about as free-to-play as you're going to get, right? Realistically, I get that some people might not have been playing at that time, but if we can't categorize fusions as free-to-play friendly, then realistically we can't categorize any champion inside this game as free-to-play friendly, because in certain instances, there's going to be somebody that doesn't have them. They weren't playing when they were released, right? Those sorts of things. So I can make an all-rare team, and it's still not technically free-to-play friendly because you might not have a particular rare that's in the team. So it's a little bit, nitpicky, I would say, in some cases. So I'm going to say this is probably the most free-to-play friendly team I've seen in quite some time that can beat both stages. As you can see, we're not setting any records in terms of the times or anything like that, but this isn't necessarily a speed farming team. This is just going for consistency. If you have some insane champions, you can certainly get through this dungeon a little bit quicker, but, it is what it is. So what makes this team tick so well? Well, we have Newt, and we have Neldor, who's coming in with the A1 freezes. So as you can see, the enemy champions are frozen flat out quite often, even on the waves. And that is, of course, going to give us a lot of turn meter control against the FireKnight as well. Because if you didn't know, for FireKnight Hard, you do need to place freezes instead of turn meter reduction to reduce his turn meter. So it's an interesting mechanic, certainly. Additionally, FireKnight Hard is definitely the hardest of the dungeon reworks that we had complete. There's, champions that are capable of soloing Dragon Hard 10. My Corvus goes through Dragon Hard 10 completely naked without an issue, and I'll probably be making a video on that at some point in the future. Spider, we have basically duo capabilities with like HP burners or Marius or those sorts of things, which is pretty crazy. Ice Golem, it is what it is. I don't think anybody's really farming Ice Golem that hard. Even still, I do sometimes to try and get some cursed gear, but that's about the extent of it. So FireKnight is definitely where most players are going to spend their energy these days, and then, on top of that, it is the hardest, right? So I know in my Dungeons tier list, I actually ranked Dragon above FireKnight, and I do still stand by that, because you can farm XP and everything there, like I mentioned, but at the end of the day, I think you're going to get more gear usefulness out of FireKnight. So this is why you want to be farming it. For other team members, we have Farrakhan the Fat, who's coming in for an ally attack, of course, and then a decreased defense on the A1. We have Lady Mikage, who's coming in for an ally attack and absolutely insane amounts of control. And she also does a crap ton of attack damage boosting for Zenogray Blade Master. And we'll talk about Zenogray. She is definitely the MVP of this team, in my opinion. Basically, everybody else could be substituted out, but in this particular team, at least, you would not be able to substitute Zenogray Blade Master unless you had somebody else who's capable of doing a aura like her. You don't have to have Zenogray to run this team. You could put somebody else in her spot, especially if they have a Speed in All Battles aura, but then they're also going to have to be a multi-hit champion, and preferably somebody from the Shadowkin. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look into the champion side of things here. and see how and why this works. So first up, we have Lady Mikage. This is how her build is going to be looking. She's in FireKnight's castle, and make sure you stick around a little bit. We're talking about AI presets after I do a champion talk through here. So AI presets are extremely important for this particular run as well. So we got 367 speed, 516. She's mainly a PvP Mikage, so she's kind of got stats based around that. We have Zinogre Blademaster, who I try to just get a bunch of speed on, so she's at 291 speed, and then with that, she's doing as much damage as I can possibly get out of her with that speed, right? She still needs a decent amount of accuracy as well. 5,000 attack. This is how she's going to be looking in FireKnight's castle, so with my area bonus, she's just over 310 speed. She does, importantly, also bring a speed aura in dungeons by 30%, which is absolutely insane. This means basically an extra like 30% speed for all your champions. It is definitely hard to overestimate just how incredibly useful this is. And as you can see, what makes this even more free-to-play or low-spend friendly, as long as you have this champion, of course, is she does not have a single book in her. So she doesn't need to be booked out to make this work. I don't think Lady Mikage does either, so you don't need to worry about spending mythical tomes, of course. Newt, he does not have to, well, he does have to be booked, preferably, so that you can have the higher land rate of the freeze on the A1, but I was also using him when he was not booked, so he's a very viable champion for this. Newt, I would definitely categorize as a free-to-play friendly champion because we had the fusion for him, as well as so many different shard events that have featured him, so a lot of players will have him by now. He has the A3 max HP damage, and then of course 100% freeze on the A1. Absolutely insane champion. In terms of the build, this is how he's looking right here. So not Faction Wars, but FireKnight. So for speed, we have him at 264, 100 and then 255 on the crit rate, crit damage, 4900 defense, 388 on the accuracy. Farrakhan the Fat, this is how he is looking. So he's rocking with 317 on the speed, and then enough accuracy to land his decreased defense at 356. And then finally, we have the man himself, Neldor, who is an important champion in this composition as well. 253 speed, he's definitely a little bit lower, and then 387 on the accuracy, and then just as much damage stats as we can get out of him on top of that. And what makes him so special is he has a 3x hitter, with each hit having a 40% chance of placing a freeze, which seems decent, but what really sets him apart and what makes him better than some of the options like Creodin, I think it is, that a lot of people use, is his passive. So whenever an ally places a freeze, think for example Newt, right? This champion has a 30% chance to attack the target with their default skill. So he's getting an extra 3x hitter where he has a 40% chance on each hit to place a freeze. Every time Newt goes in, there's a 30% chance to proc that, right? Which is absolutely insane. And then we do actually use his A3 as well, which is an AoE ×2, and then having a 75% chance on each hit of placing a decreased speed. On FireKnight 10, a lot of it depends on if he gets that placed, right? So essentially on FireKnight 10, what happens with the team is you'll go through perfectly fine, and then you'll get to the final wave, and generally the boss is able to take a turn, and the shield comes back down after though, and you can still beat him. So if you're using these speeds, you just need to make sure that you do have enough tankiness to also get you through that smack that's going to come in from him. That being said, how would you get around that? Well, you just build more speed on this team if you are capable of doing so, okay? So this team is going to work perfectly fine for you. For Stage 6, 100% win rate, right? This will benefit most players. Stage 6 is a very solid stage to farm. You still have very good drop rates. It's a void affinity stage, so you don't need to worry about the affinity of the champions that you're bringing in. Of course, the next void affinity stage is 10, and you're going to get significantly better drop rates than Stage 2. So make sure that you use this team, but also, on the other hand, make sure that you do build them a little bit quicker for Stage 10, right? So just to essentially up that consistency. Now, finally, we're going to talk about the champion presets. And now this is important. So for Wave 2, Zinogre has her A2 turned off because this is going to be a 4x hitter with an increased speed. On her third wave, so on the boss, she opens and has a priority 1 on this skill. Farrakhan, he can do pretty much whatever he wants, except he opens with the beatdown on Wave 2 and then doesn't use it again. And importantly, and this is incredibly important, turn off his A2 for the FireKnight. And the reason for that is his A2 places an HP burn and 2 poisons. So obviously that on its own isn't necessary because the FireKnight's not going to take turns. But more importantly, what will happen over a longer fight is as he starts to stack those poisons up, you're going to get to a stage where you can't place any more debuffs on the boss. And that is a huge issue because of the fact that we have to place freezes to reduce his turn meter. So if it's just filled with poisons instead, you can't actually place a freeze. His turn meter's not going to get reduced, and then your run is bust. And I've had that happen to me before, so make sure that you turn off his A2, please, for the love of God. Lady Mikage, Wave 1, she metamorphs into her alternate form, and then Metamorph is turned off with a priority on Skittering Death. Metamorph is turned off, priority Skittering Death on Wave 2. And then Wave 3, importantly, she metamorphs, and then she goes into her primary form. We turn off the A2, we turn off her Metamorph, we open with the Imperial Decree, which is the ally attack, and then we have her Sinful Lash, or Shadow Lash rather, which is the only other thing being used besides her ally attack. Why is this? Well, her A1 brings in an ally from the Shadowkin faction. The only ally on this team from the Shadowkin faction is Lady Zenogre, so we're getting an extra 3 hits every time she does her A1. Zenogre has okay damage stats, and then she's built, of course, in Phantom Touch as well. I do recommend building most of your heroes in Phantom Touch so they can get those extra hits on the FireKnight shield, as well as just some extra damage here. So that's how you set her up. Neldor does whatever he wants. Wave 1, we open and then turn off Chromatic Cross on A2, or Wave 2. We don't use the A2 at all on the boss, because we just don't need it. Chromatic Cross is the opener, and then turned off, so he's only using his A1 after that. Newt, similar kind of thing. We got Blessed Bash being the opener and then not used again on Wave 2. And then actually what we do here is we open with his A1, and the reason for that is you'll need... So if you're on stage 6, you're going to need that additional turn meter reduction, essentially off the start. And then if you're on stage 10, obviously you're still going to need that turn meter reduction. Anyways, the shield should be down at that point on both stages. So you just want that extra turn meter reduction first before he does his Blessed Bash. And then we also turn off the A2, because essentially, if he's not doing max HP 3 times hitter, I want him doing turn meter reduction. I don't care about the counterattack because he's not taking a turn. The Fire Knight's not taking a turn whatsoever. And then we also don't really care about this weaken on there either. It's not a big deal at the end of the day. So that's the team, and it's a lot more accessible than some of these teams that you might see, right? So I figured I'd kind of showcase it and let you guys know how I farm this particular content, in the hope that, it'll help somebody progress their account and maybe work their way up to doing the Marius missions where you have to beat stage 10 of FireKnight Hard 10 times, which I think has actually been present in here a couple of times, and I can't find it right now apparently. But Marius is, of course, such an insane champion that we do need to get him, so we need to progress through those missions. And obviously the higher up you farm inside hard dungeons, the better your drop rates for mythical gear as well, which are the missions we all seem to get stuck on at the end of the day. So that being said, as always, thank you guys all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.